This ballet, Ballo della Regina, is set to music by Verdi from the third act of Don Carlos. And it has a sort of a story, which Balanchine is not trying to tell, but I think it influenced his choreographic choices. So I wanted to ask Merrill, in what way you think that the idea of the ballet scenario influenced the movement?
Well, I think, first of all, the fact that he told me about the libretto made it clear that somehow he was going to use that as a sort of a takeoff point. More for details, you know, clearly the ballet doesn't have a story, and yet clearly he's trying, the story was about a fisherman searching for the perfect pearl to put in the crown of the Queen of Spain. And in essence, I think he felt I was, I don't want to say perfect pearl, but a beautiful pearl that he wanted to highlight and show off. And when he was telling me that he was going to choreograph the ballet, he said, you know, I want the backdrop to look like mother of pearl and the costumes to reflect that. And I felt, as he choreographed it, that he was putting in little details that related to swimming and water, being underwater, or when he worked with a corps de ballet, there were waves of corps girls coming in and rolling hands, rolling in, rolling out. Somehow he used the idea from the libretto to give him little details that would make things look different. You know, the same steps look different from another ballet.
That quality too, I think you mentioned maybe in your book about a kind of gleaming quality in the movement, or glistening.
Well, glittering. I mean, you know, light being refracted through water, and how many facets there are, and it's ever changing, and yet it's you know, it's you can't quite figure out how you know, where it's going, but it's kind of it's fluid, and yet it's sharp. It's a funny dichotomy there.
I mean, water changes, and so you know, you also think of light on water. So there's little amazingly fast footsteps that
sunlight
appear.
Sparkling on water. You know, the rays of glistening. Yeah.
And when you said something to Anna about that there were some tiny little semi-pas de chas, not really pas de chas, and you said you're not supposed to jump here, but I want to see your feet.
You have to see. Yeah. I mean, this ballet is very much about footwork, intricate, quick, clear footwork, and presenting your feet all the time, which is something he worked on in class all the time, and something that appealed to me, and so it became one of my strengths. So when you're doing it at high speed, there's not time to jump, but you have to retain that intricacy and careful presentation of the feet. I mean, that became the idea of the choreography.
You know, Balanchine once said that he liked tall people because you could see the movement. And I was thinking of that in relation to you being tall. And you were working today with a couple, Joaquin de Luz and Anna, who are shorter.
Right.
Do you feel the height difference, and the difference between their heights, since she on point is quite a lot taller than he is, does that make a significant difference in how they present the movement?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I think it's easier for a smaller person to move quickly in general. I happen to be, I'm tall, but I have very small feet. And I think the size of my feet, you know, I wear a shoe like someone who's 5'3", 5'4", and I'm 5'7". So I think, you know, when you're dancing quickly, you have to not necessarily go through the entire foot, but you have to get up and down, and if you have a smaller foot, you can get up and down faster. So I think that helped me, but on the other hand, being tall, your center of gravity is higher. You have more to move through space. I think partnering-wise, Robert Weiss was not tall. You know, in a way, I was too tall for him. So I think the pas de deux is set up very much so there aren't many moments where we're literally standing side by side, so that you don't notice that kind of difference as much. We're usually separated. So, and the partner, you know, he doesn't ever have to have his hand held exactly over my head for finger pirouettes or something like that, which would require a tall partner. But tall people have done it. I mean, Sean Lavery did it. Kira Nichols did it. You know, they were both tall people. It's just that right now it happens to be smaller people.
Yes. It seemed to me too that Balanchine took advantage of your wing spread in this ballet. It's not peculiar to this ballet, but I noticed when you were demonstrating to Anna particularly, you did a lot of extending in space where you're not completely centered over the standing leg, but you're pulling off with the reaching leg, which makes you look, you know, very powerful.
Right.
Even though some of the little things are right under you.
You know, he wanted all of us to cover more space, and so we worked a lot, taking big steps and trying to make movement more expansive. We worked very slow, very quickly, trying to take a, you know, expand what was possible.
Did Balanchine ever mention anything like tarantellas or Italian dance or anything? Because I see that, a little bit of that in the choreography.
No, he never did. He never did. He really didn't, you know, when he told me he was doing the ballet, he told me about the libretto, he told, you know, the music, and that's it. There were moments when he said, you know, what can you do here, or we need a big jump here, or, you know, we need a turn here, what can you do, dear? Which leg do you like better, and all as a cone, you know, and that way he tried to make sure that I had things that I was comfortable doing or liked to do, but that was it.
It's just because it's something I noticed in the choreography in some parts, that it had that kind of folk dance, tarantella, Neapolitan look.
Yeah, but I think it's just the music that gave him that.
Right.
That,
oh, I'm sure.
You know.
Yeah, because
it has that spirit.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of these things, I think, were not specifically something he asked for, like the run in. Dun, 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 dun. That was me. I mean, he said run in a circle, and you know, and somehow that music and the fun of it and the pleasure of the ballet, it became, for me, it just became that. And I can't imagine it not being that. But I think those moments, I mean, he said, you know, he would demonstrate it. That's what he did. He would demonstrate it. And then you could take it, and if it was fun, you made it a little more, and if it was hard, you tried to cope. I mean, this pas de chat, originally, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it had to do with doing pas de chat front and pas de chat back, and it got so, he loved to challenge me. He made, you know, let's make it harder and harder and harder. And you know, there were sometimes I couldn't do it. Or I found the musicality of it, wanting to go at the last minute and be quick. And I found that more suitable for me and what I like to do. And little by little, I think it evolved into that. And he never said, oh, where's the pas de chat back or the pas de chat front? He liked what he saw. I was happy, he was happy. And there we are.
Yes.
You know, it might have been that he originally had some other ideas. The same in the entrance for the pas de deux. There's the first time I sort of fall off point, and then there was a very difficult, complicated little pas de bourrée step, and I just finally went, it doesn't make any sense to me. I couldn't do it. I was struggling. I looked awkward, and I just simplified it. And I think I felt I had the freedom to do that because when he choreographed Dawn for me, again, he gave me this one diagonal that was just impossible. And I struggled with it, and I struggled with it, and did many performances. And it often was not comfortable or secure. And one day in Saratoga, I went to him and I said, you know, I really feel I'm not doing justice to this combination. And can you either help me with it, or maybe you'd consider changing it a little bit, you know, because I just feel I'm not doing this, you know, I'm not happy with the way I look. He said, dear, it's yours. Do whatever you want. You know, and I thought, really? Okay, and one part of me, I was happy, because then I felt, okay, I'll find something. The other part of me wanted him to change it. I didn't want to change it. But I think having had him say that to me so much earlier when I wasn't as accomplished, gave me a certain freedom in Ballo to think, okay, it's this really, it was clear, it's mine. It's clear he's trying to give me everything that I'm good at, to highlight what I can do best. And if I can, you know, have to alter some little thing, as long as I keep the spirit of it, and it's not some major step. Like, I wasn't going to change those hops. I was
The ones that were supposed to be in first.
In first, going around and around and around. I wasn't going to, I asked him, I said, you know, because when he gave it to me, he said, you know, dear, nobody could do. Now you will do. I was like, yeah, okay. I'll try. You know, I'll work on it, and I worked on it, and I worked on it, and I just felt I was not achieving any kind of virtuosic look at all. So again, I went to him and I said, you know, you know, I'm not happy with the way I'm doing this. Does this create the kind of look that you want? And if it doesn't, would you, maybe you could change it. And he said, he kind of hesitated, and then he said, I'll change it, and then he didn't change it. And I kept doing run-throughs, we kept doing run-throughs, and he kept not changing it. And finally I went and I said, you know, you did say you were going to change it, and I really don't think I'm doing justice to this. And then he took about 2 seconds, and he said, well, and then he came out with this échappé step.
Yes, with a fifth in between.
With a fifth in between, and plie. It was the plie I needed.
But it's very spectacular.
Oh, it is. It's a unbelievable step. You know, and it goes on so long, and he wanted, you know, jumping, and it wasn't just, you know, slide from first to second, it was jump from first to second. But it made all the difference. The musicality in Ballo is particularly, because of the speed, it's very easy to make everything blurred. It's also easy to not hit accents, because you have so much to fit in a small amount of time. But in class, Balanchine was very strict about being, even when you're doing very fast tendus, you know, start, stop, and being precise on the music. You know, his favorite trick was to have a chord, and then you had to keep the tempo, so you knew exactly where you were without having the music to listen to. So you internalized a rhythm, so you could react to that rhythm and maintain it. And then when you become that aware of what the rhythm is and how much time you have for each beat, then when you're in a ballet, you know exactly how much you can play with that note, and you can hold something to the last minute. Yet, you know, it's not 1 and 2. I mean, when I teach it, I have to go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, 8 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. But it's very square. Yeah. And that's not the way a seasoned dancer would want to do it. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, 8 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. You know, it has dynamics. Mm-hmm. And but you need to be able to be very square and know exactly where the center of the beat is in order to be able to play with it. And dancers tend to hear, they're familiar with the music, and they almost hear the music before it's played. Mm-hmm. And I think you have to wait to hear it. Mm-hmm. And you don't know, especially when you have live music, you don't know what the conductor's going to do. They could have a retard, they could slow down or speed up, and if you're just on automatic pilot, even the basics are going to get fouled up, much less finding some expression of the music. You're having to be, you're related to the music so much. You're an expression of the music in so many ways that if you only have a tape playing in your head instead of really listening to the music, then mm-hmm. you've lost something. And I think that for me, I discovered things in ballets actually when tempos were bad. Too slow, too fast, because suddenly you have to cope, and you have to find a way to make a movement bigger or be more efficient, make something smaller. And then sometimes you find real solutions to problems that, you know, a step you could never conquer or that you always felt awkward with or something like that, and suddenly you hear a new instrument and you can relate to that, or you have more time and it ends up showing you the solution to a dilemma, as well as being more creative. I don't know.
I just wanted to ask you a little bit about the changes that were made for the television version. There was one particular one in your solo.
Well, there are actually quite a few. There are quite a few because of when the camera's in the center, the camera can't see out in the corners. It has a V view ability to see, and often we would be in the front and going out to the side. So he had to change that so we wouldn't go too far front in the opening. That changed for sure. And in the pas de deux, again, trying to see two people come from very different spots was hard. So he changed how we got into meeting in the pas de deux. My solo, first solo in particular, had to change a lot because they had painted the floor of the studio in a way that was going to match the backdrop. They had some kind of underwater scenery, and somehow the paint that they used made the floor slippery. And because I have to use off-balance movement so much to maintain that kind of the speed that's necessary, I'd be on the edge of my shoe and I'd fall. I was falling constantly. I'd have to run in a circle quickly, I'd fall. And it just became clear that I was going to keep falling. And so he changed the steps. We changed a number of transitional steps so that the most important, the highlight steps are still there, but getting into them and out of them sometimes had to change.
And I think you mentioned a circle of piqué turns that became fouettes, and then fouettes en dedans because of foot injury, and then they never went back to
never went back. When Balanchine choreographed the second solo, which has the piqué turn to arabesque, before he gave me that step, he said, we need a turn here, what can you do, dear? And I knew that virtuoso ballets have fouettes, and I don't like fouettes. I never liked doing fouettes. I didn't want to have to do fouettes, so I said anything but fouette turns. So he came up with that step, fine. And we got to the end of the ballet, and he knew I was tired, and I guess he knew by then he knew I didn't want to do fouette turns, so he gave me a piqué turn circle, with Ricky kind of somehow following behind me. I don't really remember, but it seemed to me he kind of had to run after me. So when we did the television version, circles don't, if the camera follows you, you don't see that a circle is being made, and if the camera's too far away, then you don't see the dance well enough. So he changed the step, and he said, well, do fouette turns. Well, by the time right about I don't know how long before the filming, I sprained my ankle. And the tempo for these particular fouette turns is rather slow. Yes. And I couldn't it hurt my ankle too much. I couldn't do regular fouette turns on my left foot. So he said, do en dedans fouettes, which were very hard. And I worked on it a lot, and for the filming, I managed to do them. But then when it came time then we filmed it, and then it didn't go. The subscription performances had used it up, and so it didn't go for 2 or 3 years. And when we went back to do it again, Ricky didn't remember what his step was. I wanted to go back to my piqué turns, and he didn't remember the choreography. So then I was kind of stuck doing fouette turns, and I tried to do the en dedans, but in performance, I was just too tired. I couldn't do it. The fouette turns were bad enough.